been teaching communication skills for many years, almost a decade in the engineering college, and he has expertise in European literature, and he is a critic of technology, but he uses technology. I mean, where is the limit? In the last session also, there were discussions on that. In this session, you'll have a full-length discussion, complete engagement on technology. The topic being functions of classroom teaching in the age of modern communication technology. So now, Dr. Asif, the floor is to you. You can take over.
Thank you so much. And good afternoon to all of you, the participants. I'm going to interact with you. I'm audible, I hope, to all of you.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
I'm going to discuss with you
Yes, sir.
the process of developing scientific attitude or scientific mind through classroom interaction. So this is the topic of our discussion today. There are certain things which I'll share with you, and I hope that you'll get at least enlightened at the end of the interaction. Now, you have been teaching, I hope, for many years. Most of you may have been teaching, in fact, for many years, and some of you might be new also to the teaching. You know that education has many purposes, but one of the most important, factors or purposes of education is to enlighten people, to make them more rational. This is what we mean by scientific. That is to think critically, rationally, objectively. These are the things which we keep in our mind when we talk about scientific mind. Now, we also know that scientific mind, you see, if we talk about scientific mind, it means that there are minds which are not scientific. This is the logical inference that if we talk about scientific mind, then it means that there are minds which are not scientific. Now, in order to understand what scientific mind means, or what scientific attitude or outlook or disposition is, we should try to understand something which is opposite of science. Like, for example, when we say science, we basically mean something which is opposite to nature. This is one meaning of science. Another meaning of science is that it involves basically a process of creation of knowledge. We as human beings have created so many things. All the disciplines which we study as subjects, all of them have been created by human beings. And at the same time, we also know that very few of us are involved in creating knowledge. Not all human beings are involved in creating knowledge. Now, the question is that, how is it so that certain peoples create knowledge and the rest of the people consume knowledge in their mental life as well as in their practical life? Now, when we talk about science, now, I would like to make you conscious that while talking to you, sometimes I might get slightly philosophical, though I will try to not look philosophical, because I will try to be as simple as possible, but the nature of the topic is such that sometimes it is quite possible. But I'll explain, and wherever you have some kind of ambiguity or question, you'll be free to raise. Now, science basically means something which is opposite to nature. It means that man by nature is not a scientific being. If a child is born, for example, and is not taken to schools or formal institution, he and she will grow on a very different line. That is something which is very simple, and I hope that all of you understand it. So it means that when we, bring in literacy or education, which is the first step, we try gradually to denaturalize the child. And at the same time, the child starts imbibing all those things with which he was not born in this world. Therefore, scientific basically means that something which is not natural. We have so many tendencies which are natural. When we start getting education and start getting more rational, all those tendencies you see are somehow suppressed. And in some of us, radically minimized. That their function, you see, or interference is minimum in our daily conduct and behavior. Now, these are, some basic idea related with what we mean by science and scientific attitude. I'm going to take up with you some of the elements of scientific mind, which perhaps will help you to understand what exactly I mean. Now, you know that we are endowed with certain mental faculties, like, for example, memory, reason, imagination, intuition, power of observation, critical analysis, interpretations. All these functions you see we perform because of our mind. And these functions you see we can perform even if we are not educated to some extent, not to the extent which we are expected while living in a human society. Now, when we talk about the elements of or components or traits of scientific mind, then these basic things we should keep in mind, like memory, for example, imagination, for example, reason, for example, intuition, and at the same time, while conducting any operation, we have to be very objective, very skeptical. These are the things which we maintain in our daily life. As a teacher. Now, when we develop scientific mind, or when we attempt to develop a scientific mind, then there are certain assumptions on which we have to reflect. Like, for example, it is not necessary that in order to develop scientific mind in our students, we have to teach scientific subjects. Like, for example, there are certain subjects which are classified as scientific subjects, like physics, maths, chemistry, biological sciences. And there are subjects you see which are not classified rigidly as scientific subjects, like social sciences, arts, fine arts, and there are so many of them. But they have scientific elements at the same time. Now, when we promote or develop scientific mind in our students, it is not necessary that we have to teach scientific subjects. Development of scientific temperament or outlook, you see, is not dependent on the nature of subject which we teach. One can develop a scientific mind, in a group of students, even by teaching subjects which are not classified as scientific subjects, like a range of social sciences, arts, what we call humanities, fine arts, take for example. And it is quite possible that we teach scientific subjects, so-called scientific subjects like chemistry, physics, and maths, and may not be able to develop scientific outlook in these students. It means this: the nature of the mind and the nature of the subjects do not follow the same course of development. Means that, a scientific temperament and mind and outlook can be developed even with the help of the subjects which is not considered as a scientific subject in a classical sense. And it can be developed even with those subjects which are scientific subjects, and vice versa. In this respect, we have to keep one thing in mind. The question naturally arises then, how is it possible? You see, development of scientific mind in a classroom situation basically depends on the teacher and the style of communication of the teacher and the method of the teacher, how the teacher teaches. It has nothing to do, in fact, with the nature of subject which we teach in the classroom. I mean, the nature of subject, as I say, it might be geography even. It might be chemistry, for example. It might be political science or economics, for example. If the teacher's method is not scientific, and the method means that it does not mean the teacher does not know the scientific method. It is quite possible the methodology is followed by the teacher very scientifically. What I mean by method is that the execution of the method should be scientific. The teacher, in his and her own personality, should have a scientific outlook and should know how to conduct the class, how to communicate, the entire range of what we call the riddle of his style or her style. That is, in fact, what matters while communicating to a group of students while trying to develop their scientific outlook. Now you see that a teacher who teaches a particular group of students, for example, should have certain traits of his personality or her personality, which can be considered as a highly developed personality. Like, for example, he should or she should have a command of the medium. I mean, his language or her language should be very good, irrespective of the subjects which he and she teaches. I mean, quite possible the person teaches life sciences or social sciences or humanities. His and her language should be very good. This is what I mean by command of the medium. Number two, he or she should be very articulate at the same time. Number three, should be very argumentative at the same time. And at the same time, should be very analytical. Now, if these, I'm mentioning some of the features, naturally there are so many of them. If these things are reflected in the communication of the teacher, naturally it will have some effect on the audience. Now, we should also keep in mind that it is quite possible that the teacher is very qualified and has a scientific bent of mind also while conducting the class and executes those things very well in the class. But the output is not satisfactory. Then the teacher should not get demoralized or dissatisfied. Because we must know that what we call developing scientific attitude or scientific outlook is a very tricky job. It's a very rare quality. No doubt some people are born with it to some extent, but it is largely developed and acquired in society. You see, the result is bound to be relative. It is quite possible you make systematic effort in your class. Nevertheless, you do not get the satisfactory result. And because there are so many factors. So in such a situation, you know that when we teach a group of students, the information which you transmit to them, they might gather all of them. The kind of facts which you transmit to them, they might collect all of them. And when you examine them, they might put on paper all those things. You see, the job does not end here. Though technically speaking, we consider that our job is done. We are able to teach certain lessons and the students are able to learn the lessons and they are able to produce the same thing in their script or in oral communication or presentation. We think that it's done. But the job is not done there. In fact, we have to make sure that the lesson which we have taught them or whatever subject we have taught them, whether it has become the part of their mind or not. Now, when the students are very young, like for example, some of you might be teaching students who are in class 6, 7, and 8, then it's a very different thing because we cannot expect them to follow all these things. But students of class 9, 10, 11th, and 12th who are relatively mature, they are supposed to learn things beyond the classroom. Now, we know that it's a kind of enterprise. I mean, developing scientific temperament or mind, you see, is a kind of enterprise which is full of risk. In the sense that sometimes we think that when we teach things, students should be able to learn things and reproduce things in the exam or in any other modes. in written form or in oral communication, we get satisfied that the job is done. But you see, when we critically examine our own performance and the performance of the student, then it requires to think and examine whether they have developed these things and imbibe these things in such a way that it reflects their personality and not. When you will develop from this point, from this perspective, you will find that the result is hardly satisfactory, because very few of them you see will satisfy you from this point of view. So when we promote, scientific mind and scientific temperament, these things we should keep in mind. Now let us talk about some of the things which are more important for you as a teacher. The question might be in your mind that how can we develop scientific outlook and scientific mind of the students? You see, this enterprise is neither theoretical nor it is periodic. What I mean is this. It is not like that there are certain set rules or there are certain theories which you can read, learn, and then you can teach your students according to that. There is nothing like that. Though there are people who have talked about so many things, but perhaps it will not help in the long run. Number one. Second thing is that it is not like that a scientific mind can be developed simply in certain period, like you teach in class 9th and 10th, and the students enter in 11th and 12th, and then he and she goes to the higher education. It is a lifelong struggle, in fact. But you are concerned periodically with a student. So at least when you deal with these students, or when we deal with these students for 1 year and 2 year or 1 semester and 2, we should try our best and try to see that whether whatever we teach, it has become the part of their mind or not. Now, when we try to develop a scientific outlook in a group of students, then there are certain activities you see in which you can engage them in order to make sure that whether they are displaying or exhibiting those traits which they should do or not. I'm talking about oral communication, what we call presentation. Like, for example, we can engage them in some activities like debate, discussions, dialogue, formal conversations, digressions. And when we engage them, then there are certain things which we should emphasize. Like, for example, the student should be logical in his or her expression, should at the same time be very articulate, or at least try to be articulate, and at the same time should be consistent, should be coherent. These traits one should follow very well as a teacher while observing the students performing any of these activities in the classroom. Those students who sit in the classroom as an audience, they should not remain passive. They should be listening to the speaker very carefully and noting down minute details. They should be asked to become skeptical, critical. And when suppose it is a dialogue or a debate, when it ends on a given topic, then the audience should be given certain tasks. Like, for example, as a teacher, we can test them whether they have listened properly or not, whether they have comprehended the dialogue or not, whether they have followed the process or not. And they should be asked to make observation of everything which is going on. And at the same time, finally, that is very important, they should not be asked a question to answer. Rather, they should be asked that whatever they have observed, raise some questions. Ask them to form some questions or set of questions. Now, when they form the questions, then we as a teacher have to make sure that they have comprehended the things. While framing the question, they are logical, they are very precise, they use as less number of words as possible. This is what I mean by precision. And they are not saying which they should not say. They are saying simply which they must say. These are the things you see. I mean, when you become very formal in this respect, sometimes you may create a suffocating situation also. But that is something, I mean, it is a kind of price which one has to pay in order to develop scientific mind. Now, you might notice that if you bring into play all these things, your conduct in the classroom would be very different what we have been traditionally doing in the classroom. So these are the things which one has to keep in mind while developing scientific attitude. Now, next things which is equally important is this. We should understand that again, I'm coming back to the beginning, that what we mean by scientific attitude. I have outlined before you the element of scientific attitude, at the same time, how to develop scientific attitude and what are the conditions which are very conducive to developing in a classroom situation scientific attitude. And I have also highlighted briefly that scientific attitude, I mean, while developing scientific attitudes, the role of the teacher is of critical importance. Now, you see, I had also, talked about in brief that developing scientific attitude is a very critical job. And is in fact, the toughest job which you perform as a teacher in the classroom situation. Human mind, you see, we should understand that if we talk about scientific attitude or scientific mind, in the beginning I said that scientific mind is something which is opposite to nature. And I said in one sentence that if a child is not sent to the school or formal institution, he and she will grow on a very different line. Now, education's primary aim basically is to develop scientific mind, because scientific mind is not developed simply to prepare the student to work in educational institution or what we call scientific lab. That is no doubt necessary. A scientific mind is developed in order to realize a healthy society, so that social and political institutions can work effectively. Because the health of a society, you see, simply does not depend on its material wealth and technological development. It largely depends the kind of education is given to its citizens, that is the quality of education. It is quite possible that a society is highly developed, in terms of economic progress and at the same time technological development, but its life condition is not good of the citizens simply because of the poor education. We should keep one thing in mind. So many social nuisance and maladies you see are also because of poor quality of education, in which development of or mushrooming of this unscientific thinking is one of the, biggest source of maladies. So scientific mind, you see, developing of the scientific mind is critical for many reasons. Some of them I have just mentioned. Now, why development of scientific mind is very complex? There are a number of factors. I'm going to begin formally with some of them. You see, one of the important missions of education, as I have repeatedly told, is that to develop scientific outlook in the citizens or the audience who are your students. Actually, the primary aim of scientific outlook is to minimize our dependency on different forms of ideological associations which we have as a human being in our society or in a given society. Because you see, we are surrounded with so many things as a human being, which either tries to paralyze or defunct our scientific thinking, what we call critical thinking. Look, when we teach students in a classroom situation, we deal with the student for certain minutes or certain hours. The student as a human being, you see, he spends a large number of his time, greater hours of his time outside of the classroom with the family, with the immediate neighbors, and with the larger society. And at the same time, in this age of, internet, they are connected with a very large world at the same time. And all of them, you see, treats them in a very different manner. They try to somehow affect his rational thinking. Because after all, you see, he's treated by all of them as a client and customer, or fan and followers. You see, look at the entertainment industry. No doubt, you teach them that one can learn even from them. But this industry, you see, or even the advertisement industry, students as a young fellows, you see, they are surrounded with all these things. They somehow tries to paralyze human beings' critical thinking, because you cannot become follower and fan of someone unless you become uncritical of the things. This is what I mean by different forms of social ideologies. You see, teacher, as a human being, you may like to be admired by your students because you might have done your job very well. But teacher, while communicating to a group of students, he or she is the only individual who somehow aims that his and her students should raise questions. You see, be it a politician, be it a sports person, someone from entertainment industry, be it an advertiser, all of them tries to please human beings, even young minds. Teacher, you see, while standing among the students, is the only individual who, despite pleasing, would like to be asked certain questions. And that's why you see the job of the teacher is very, very difficult. Because you see, if you look at teaching and many values which I have talked about that you have to display as a teacher in the classroom so that your students should display the same things in the process of developing scientific mind. Teaching, you see, is basically an acting. When we teach, we basically act in the classroom. And when we teach, we are not exactly what we are. We become something else. And the entire world behind us, you see, we have to forget in order to perform before an audience. Now, this we do every day, consciously and unconsciously. But there is a difference. Look, for example, in real life, I'm explaining why our job is more difficult than the job of anybody. Look, from film industry, perhaps you'll understand it better. A dialogue which is spoken by an actor is written by somebody else. The set is prepared by somebody else. The background is created by somebody else. And so many other things. Then the person who speaks the line is not speaking his own line. The same thing happens in entertainment industry. But teacher, you see, is the only person. The line which he and she speaks is his and her own line. The atmosphere is created by him and her. This is what I mean by classroom conditions. And other people, you see, have a chance to edit what they say. When you perform in the classroom, you don't have any chance to edit. You speak only once. Now, it means that the job of the teacher, you see, is very demanding. At the same time, he is performing in such a way that he can or she can promote a scientific mind at the same time. That's why you see, I just pointed out that a teacher, while acting in the classroom, means performing in the classroom, has to maintain so many things and has to do so many things that makes his, in fact, active life quite difficult in the classroom situation. And he and she is supposed to promote a scientific outlook at the same time. So these are some basic things which a teacher should keep in mind. Now, in line with the same things, there is one more point which we should, in fact, briefly discuss. Human mind, you see, is a very delicate thing. I mean, if I give a scientific definition of human mind, then basically it is just like an instrument. You see, an instrument is anything which is designed by human beings, and at the same time, it has a definite purpose. So, scientific mind, you see, I mean, human mind is just like a blank DVD, which has to be programmed, or you can call it just like any space, which one has to explore. What kind of mind our students develop depend on our style of teaching. That is the way we teach them. You see, if our methodology of teaching is not scientific, if our presentation is not very scientific, if our behavior with the student is not very rational, then it is quite possible right. Now, as I said that, I mean, it depends how we conduct ourselves in the classroom and how we teach the students. That is, our style of teaching matters a lot. Now, before I talked about our style of teaching, there is one more point which I was just discussing. That is, our human mind, you see, is just like, I mean, an instrument. An instrument, which means that it's a very delicate. You see, we are surrounded with so many instruments in our life. We execute so many tasks with different types of electronic instruments in our life. But we must keep one thing. If human mind is an instrument, it is much more delicate than any other things. Like, for example, when a student goes to certain, I mean, labs, like take, for example, mechanical lab. Mechanical lab is bound to be very crude, very heavy at the same time. Your students can become very rough and tough with the instrument at the same time, very casual. But when the same student goes to the lab of electronics or microbiology, for example, before he and she touches the instrument, there is a manual which one has to follow. There might be instructor or attendant who helps the student how to handle it. The student has to perform the experiment, then keep the instrument very carefully so that it does not get infected or affected. Now, the kind of care which we take with a particular instrument depends on the efficiency of the instrument and at the same time is the structure of the instrument. Human mind, you see, in its efficiency is much more powerful, at the same time much more delicate. If it is not protected properly from so many factors which are likely to affect its efficiency, then it is likely to get corrupt, as a electronic gadgets gets corrupt, technically speaking. Now, we know that in real life, there are so many factors you see which tend to corrupt the functioning of our scientific mind. Therefore, the job of the teacher becomes very critical to keep the mind of the students clean in that respect. Now, if it is a very delicate instrument, I can give some example in order to illustrate it. You see, today, for example, and this is what we should at least try to show to the students and make them conscious also. I mean, you see, these days, they deal with so many electronic devices and they are getting dependent on them. We know that these modern instruments, because man, you see, is the tool makers as well as tool users also. And whatever tools we develop, those tools affect the working of our basic, biological organs also. Like, for example, our mental organs consist of our memory, our, imagination, our reasoning. All these things gradually get affected. And these days it is not difficult to understand. As modern AI and everything has been developed, you see that young students, even teachers, have become so dependent on them that they have led to their own impoverishment. Now, in order to, make students aware, that is when they become so dependent on these, electronic devices, we have to make it clear to them that in their own mind, they have much more potentials than any kind of electronic device with which they are surrounded. Like, for example, you see, the speed of our imagination is in fact faster than even the speed of light. You see, the speed with which we recollect sometime, even after the gap of 10 to 20 years, is remarkable. Less than a fraction of a second it takes that your senses can recall everything. Now, when we talked about scientific mind, the development of scientific mind, you see, requires an ideal condition also. Unfortunately, that ideal condition, you see, is gradually diminishing. Like, for example, if our senses are not in good health, our outlook, you see, mental outlook is bound to get affected. Now, this is something which goes beyond the control of the teacher. I simply wanted to make ourselves aware of it. Otherwise, it is something which teacher may not have much control over, because it depends on the actual life of the people, in what kind of social and economic condition people live. You know that when you teach, I'm talking about the development of scientific mind, but I know that if the class condition is not conducive, like, for example, if the number of students is huge and they come from a different background at the same time, and you do not have much space to deal with them, then, and if you are asked to perform this job, life is bound to be very difficult. But that's a very different thing. We have to keep in mind that while developing this attitude, the onus, you see, and the responsibility basically falls on the teacher. The teacher, you see, becomes very vital. Now, if the teacher is very vital, for many reasons, some of them I'm going to discuss with you, we should keep one thing in mind. You see, today, because of the promotion of modern technology and the advancement of so many things, the teachers are being sidelined. It is being said that through hard work, you can learn so many things. And one is forced to act like a coach. A coach is a person, you see, who's simply concerned with very limited things. That is, you teach something and they are supposed to repeat the same things. A teacher is not a coach, because a teacher is supposed to perform so many things which a coach is not concerned with. That's why you see the performance of a coach is, numerically speaking, is much more effective than that of a teacher, because the teacher is supposed to take care of into many things. Like, for example, coach has to take certain things, technically speaking, what we call certain topics or certain areas, and has to finish within a limited amount of time. That perhaps is not the moral job of the teacher. Though technically he's supposed to do the same thing, what we call completing the syllabus. But if the teacher is concerned with the holistic development of the students, completing the syllabus should not be the basic preoccupation. Otherwise, it will affect so many other things. Now, as I said that the teacher's job, you see, is very critical in developing scientific mind. Now, I have mentioned many things that the teacher is supposed to have in himself and herself, those traits which we call scientific traits, and which I have discussed with you. One of them is the most vital, which I would like to bring to your attention, and that is your art of communication. That how you communicate. Now, by communication, you see, I do not mean that somebody is able to speak English or Urdu or Hindi or any other language. By communication, I mean so many things. You see, when we take a class, whatever subject we teach, whether it is math or whether it is literature or whether it is chemistry or anything else, we basically communicate. Now, anybody who is concerned with the development of the mind and personality of the students has to take his and her communication very critically. I mean, whatever subject we teach, one thing which you should keep in mind, that we are able to draw the attention of the students on the merit of the quality of communication. I mean, it is not like that you create a kind of situation and students have to pay attention to you and they look upon you and see somewhere else. That situation is very paradoxical. I mean, if a teacher is very strict, for example, can create a situation that the student is forced to look upon him and her while somebody is teaching. That is not what I mean. I mean that when we teach, we should be able to fascinate them. Fascinate not simply because what we teach and what kind of knowledge we give. Fascinate because the way we speak, the way we express, the way we project, the way we analyze, the way we interpret things, the way we argue. These are the things you see which one has to perform. All these are basic components of communication. It is not necessary that you speak very fluently. That depends on the situation. Sometimes you have to speak very slow if the subject matter which you are taking, you discuss it very critically, and the subject matter itself demands that you have to be slow. The speed of your communication is not a problem. The problem is that whatever you say, we have to say in such a manner that it catches the attention of the audience. This is what we call beautiful communication, which is a very, very difficult job. Because you see, one underlying this is that sometimes you may have a lot of knowledge and you have done a lot of hard work also. But when you go to perform before an audience, the audience is, particularly these days, you see audience here, I mean the students, they are not there these days. That you tell something which they do not know. It is quite possible that sometimes you say something which others already know. But you have to say something in such a manner, this is what I mean by style, that it is not possible other way around. And in the days to come, we as a teacher will remain relevant simply on the basis of our style of communication, not so much because we have certain kind of information, certain kind of facts which they do not know. Suppose, for example, somebody is teaching geography and has, I mean, these days, in fact, so many things can be known about geography by clicking on internet, except some conceptual things. And even if you teach something conceptual, your power of analysis and your manner of interpretation will play a vital role. That again comes under the, domain of your style of communication. So these things matter a lot, because any person who is not having good communication skill, and by good communication skill, I do not mean very simple things. I mean a lot of things, some of them I have discussed with you, is unfit for teaching as well as for administration. Because if a person's communication is poor, it also reflects that the person is suffering from the clarity of thought. And such a person, you see, is not very suitable to hold a public office, be it governance or be it instruction. Now, what I'm trying to tell is that we always emphasize that honesty, fairness are good virtues. No doubt they are very good things and very important things at the same time. But we hardly talk about that communication is also a very important thing. And we should keep in mind, good communication, you see, in a teacher reflects the teacher's mental clarity and certain level of mental growth and intellect also. A good teacher is one who simply does not produce good students. Because goodness in a person, you see, can be enforced in many ways, or it can be inculcated in many ways. A person should be good as a human being, but should be intelligent also. A person is made good in society so that he or she should follow others also. The primary function of intelligence, which a teacher promotes in the classroom, is to liberate the audience and the mankind in general. Now, whether obedience is a good thing or freedom is a good thing, it is upon you to decide. Because as a teacher, perhaps you have better idea what exactly it means. Now, since we are living in the modern age, the age of technology, and I have just spoken that in the time to come, we would remain relevant to the classroom, not on the basis of what information we bring to the classroom, what factual data we transmit to the students. We would remain relevant to the classroom on the basis of how we articulate. I will give some simple example. Perhaps you have better experience of it than me. You see, when you watch certain social media content, it is not like that the content you do not know. And whatever is said, you simply do not know. Many times you pay attention and the audience pay attention to the content because it is being communicated in a manner which others cannot communicate. But here is the difference. The content you see is edited content. I mean, a person is speaking 10 to 20 times and one shot of them is chosen as the best one. When you perform in the classroom as a teacher, you don't have any chance to look back. You have to say simply once. That's why, because you do everything on the spot. There's no chance to edit anything. Now, all these things we have to keep in mind as a teacher. And that's why I have been underlining that our job is very, very difficult. Though sometimes it may not be acknowledged to be as difficult as I'm underlining here. Teaching, as I told you, it involves two things. It is basically an art of acting, which involves an art of communication also. Now, an art of communication, you see, means many things. Some of the features I have just mentioned before you, and some of the features you can critically examine also. Now, see, when we say something as an art of communication, art basically means that something which is made, means something which is not natural, number one. And at the same time, something which is designed in such a way that in its functioning, it looks beautiful. Now, when I say that it looks beautiful, I mean something that is, because you see, when you address an audience in the classroom, I mean your students, whatever you say, that's a different thing, but your primary aim is to draw their attention. We draw their attention spontaneously if our communication is executed efficiently. If the communication is not conducted properly, then all the time you have to interrupt yourself in order to draw their attention in the name of discipline. Now, art of communication, you see, as a teacher, as a human being, no doubt we teach, but we keep on learning throughout our life. When we conduct our communication in the classroom, we have to be very careful that we deliver our lecture in a very objective manner. Number two, we should use a very formal language, whatever language you speak, whether you speak, I mean, Urdu language or English or whatever you choose as a medium of your communication, or Hindi, for example, one has to be very formal, very objective with the students. And you might be puzzled what I mean by objectivity. You see, if we are really interested to develop scientific mind in the students, the way we address them is very interesting example. I mean, we should address them in such a manner that we do not develop unnecessary intimacy with the students, or frankness, what we call. I mean, maintain a distance from the students. Because if you get very close to the students as a human being, You see, when we bring an object very close to our eye, we do not see anything. Similarly, when we get very close to something, we neither think critically about it nor we analyze it. In order to develop a critical thinking, what you say to them, I mean, that your content should be reflected upon by these students, it is necessary that in your address, we maintain a certain degree of distance from them. Now, when we teach students who are too young, like in class 5th, 6th, 7th, naturally that kind of thing is not possible. But when we teach class 9, 10th, 11th, and 12th, then it is quite possible that you, naturally here there is no set rules, but you have to develop certain art. You have to be very creative and innovative to maintain a distance from the students. If you maintain, I'm saying that in your address, the way you conduct your communication with them, you should adopt certain techniques to maintain a distance from them, emotional distance. Suppose you do experiment with one batch of students whom you are going to teach with the commencement of new session. Maintain this, conduct over 6 months. I'm sure that you will find some difference in the behavior of those students. Though all of you would not reflect, but some of them are bound to reflect that they are growing on a very different line, particularly when they interact with you. Now, here we should keep one thing in mind. Whether a student has a scientific mind or not, developing scientific mind or not, after you have tried your best, depends how the students react and conduct himself and herself in daily life. Because you see, scientific outlook and scientific attitude can be understood simply in its manifestation and conduct. So long the person is not acting, you cannot know whether the person has a scientific mind or unscientific mind. Because it is not a concrete thing, it is functional. One can understand it in the light of how it functions. So these are some of the things, particularly related with how we can, mold our style of communication with the help of which we can promote some kind of scientific outlook in the students. Because you see, scientific, and when you interact with them, there are so many situations. I have discussed some of them. One of them is that these days, particularly in the age of technology, when you have done your job very well, it is not necessary that you ask them question. You raise question and ask them to give answer. In the days to come, it is not the solution which will become important, because these days you see they can get solution from a variety of sources. Our relevance to the classroom is on the basis of what kind of talent we reflect while framing questions. A teacher's quality of mind is known the way he and she frames question. Similarly, how a student, when we ask a student, we should ask to form certain questions. You'll be able to know very well the quality of the student's mind. It is not necessary all the time that we ask them to give answer. That no doubt is the part of the job. But if we are concerned with the development of scientific mind, it's better to ask them to raise questions. And when they raise questions, there are so many things which we have to look at. Even their style of communication, how they articulate, for example, how they express, how they project. Because in a live situation, you see, we do not simply communicate with words. We communicate with many things. Our expression, for example, gesture, for example, posture is there. So many factors are there, whether all of them come into play or not. In most of the people, you see some 1 and 2 elements are very common.
Sir, you are not audible.
Just a minute.
But we can see he is not talking.
Sir, you are not audible, sir.
Audible now?
Yes, sir. Now you are audible.
I'm audible?
Audible?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
There
Right
is
now, you are audible.
some technical problems. If I'm audible, then I can continue.
Yes, sir, audible.
Yes, sir.
So in fact, I was talking that in this age of, technology and artificial intelligence, it is your style of communication which is going to play a very vital role in keeping you relevant to the classroom and also performing your job with, greater satisfaction. I'm audible, I think?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
You are
Yes,
audible.
sir.
Yes, sir.
All right. Yes. I have, you see, during my interaction with you at times underline this idea that it's a better these days to ask your student to frame some questions, to form some questions rather, instead of asking them to solve something or to, give answer. Because you see, when we form certain questions, it's a very difficult thing to form questions than to answer. And this activity, if you engage students in this kind of activity, I think you will get very unconventional result. The kind of result which you may not have expected. And this kind of job, task cannot be given to, at elementary level, it can be given to class 9, 10, 11, and 12. Because you see, a question you see has to be rationally framed. Rationally framed is that there should be logic behind it. It should have some kind of, concrete meaning, what exactly it want to say. It is like developing an equation in maths. Not everybody can develop, or developing or composing a symphony in music. People can play music, but not everybody can develop a symphony. Similarly, or writing certain verses, in poetry. People can recite poetry, but it is not necessary that they can write poetry. Similarly, when we ask them to frame questions, the job, in fact, is very difficult, and I think that it will play a very important role in enlightening students about what they are learning. So these are some basic things about the scientific attitude I have discussed with you, that is nature and its function and the kind of condition which we create in order to promote scientific outlook, and what is the role of the teacher in developing this scientific, mind, and what are the problems and challenges the teacher can face, particularly in the age of modern technology, while developing scientific outlook. So these are the things which I wanted to share with you. And now I would invite that you people should raise some questions so that there will be much more things in your mind, and I will definitely try to shed light on them.
Good afternoon, sir. This is Aisha Khan from ABK School Girls. Sir, I have a question for you. Sir, in the primary level, how can we build memory, intuition, and objectivity? You had discussed in students while teaching, so that they grow not just as good learners, but as thoughtful individuals without the fear of being judged.
No, you're right, but I had also said that these things are very difficult to, bring into play, particularly at
Right, sir.
But at the same time, as far as the memory is concerned, you see, most of the things which I have discussed, be it memory or reasoning or the power of reflection and observation, in a classroom situation, one can no doubt display these things to some extent. But you see, these traits are supposed to be displayed in real life. The real life means the life beyond the lab and classroom.
Right,
And
sir,
in
right.
that respect, you see, sometimes you find a student is performing very well in the classroom situation, and they score very well also. But when you look at them, they do not look very promising in the long run. In the same way as there are teachers, I mean, our own community, many of us have a lot of things in our mind. We know so many things, but very few of us look very impressive and very inspiring, because that depends on the dynamic dimension of the person and the kind of personality the person has. In making a personality, you see, knowledge is one element. There are so many other factors which we are conscious, but we do not talk about. I'm sure that you understand what I mean.
Right, sir.
And the same happens with the students also. I mean, we take into account the growth of the mind of the students in a classroom situation, but a student is a part of society. The health of his and her memory does not simply depend on the classroom condition. It also depends the kind of family condition, immediate neighborhoods, the larger society. Because you see, if human mind gets affected by communication, no doubt. That's why I meant by using the analogy that it is like a blank DVD. What kind of data you feed inside it, it will display when you play it. You see, the students interact with you in the classroom for a few minutes and few hours. Most of the time, you see, he is being interacted, and he interacts or she interacts with larger society. And you know the quality of communication which is going outside. When we talk about the growth of the mind, the data which you have fed inside the mind, the student might learn it and can reproduce it again in the answer script. But you see, there are so many things which are going in the real life which are bound to affect the mind. Therefore, the teacher cannot be held accountable to all types of things. I mean,
Right,
those
sir.
things that my son and daughter should also become a very good human being. That's why I have brought to the school. Perhaps they are putting extra responsibility on the teacher. The teacher is not responsible for all those things, because it all depends. The health of his memory and the quality of the mind, no doubt, largely depends on the kind of society in which the child is growing. Now, when the student, that's why I told that when the student is in class 11th and 12th, such a student can slightly isolate from society in order to manage his mental health. But two young students, like in class 6 and 5th, that's not possible for them. That's why the parents' role is equally critical.
Right, sir.
Their growth of the
Sir,
mind.
the fear of being judged is what hinders everything, sir. I feel like, what I have experienced, the young minds, the fear of being judged. This is what, hinders all the aspects.
No,
कि
you're
वो
right.
क्या सोचेगा, वो क्या करेगा, वो क्या
Yes.
समझेगा.
Yes. The reason is that because you see, today, if you ask your parents, their range of communication was very limited. I mean that they were surrounded by the people they used to interact. And if they used to go, to watch television or radio, for example, all the programs were very timely. Today, for example, 24 hours, he and she is flooded with information. They watch images which have nothing to do with their real life. And they understand it quite late in life. Till that time, the damage has already been done.
True, sir.
So what you see, the fear of being judged, this kind of fear grips those people who are not able to withstand the impact of communication. You see, when the range of your communication is very wide, because human mind has its own limit to absorb things. If the communications range is very wide, so naturally the mind is bound to get collapsed.
Right, sir.
You see, when you are said something by your mother, you may not get very hurt because the situation is very different. You have chance to react also, to respond also. When you are being judged by a person, this is what I mean by online communication, what you call trolling these days. You have nothing to do with the person. You do not even see the person, in which condition, in which situation the person is making this statement. Even sometimes a joke may be misunderstood in online communication. That's why you see online teaching is equally very dangerous thing.
It's a tough job, sir.
It makes you uncritical.
Yes, sir. Right.
You see, one example which I will give, when you people teach in the classroom, you may be very good as a teacher, as a human being. And when you ask the students may admire for a very wrong reason sometimes. In the classroom, they will say that they aspire to become this and that and everything, but they would never say that I would like to become like you, sir, or like you, madam. The reason is this. They generally admire those things and like and aspires to become those of which they do not have any experience. Since the teacher stands with the students every day in the classroom, they are very close, physically speaking. They develop certain degree of empathy also.
Right, sir.
And at the same time, when a communication is conducted, what we call in classroom situation, physical situation, one can become very critical of the person. And when that same content is delivered online, very few people will remain critical, because you see, online communication's nature is that it sucks your mind. You get dissolved. We use a better term in science, we call it immersion. And naturally, in such a situation, you are likely to forget everything. Many people whom we admire online, if we meet in real life, perhaps you will get disillusioned as a human being. They have nothing to do what they show. That's why a teacher has to be very charismatic in the classroom. And maintaining charisma in the classroom is not an easy task, because the student is very close. You see, maintaining a charisma from a distance is very easy, but maintaining a charisma from a close hand is a very difficult, a very challenging thing. That's why I say that many people whom we admire in filmic form, we may get very disillusioned of them if we meet them over a period of time. Teacher, you see, meets the student every day. And that's why the job is very difficult. I hope I have given your answer.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Excuse me, sir. My name is Hina. Good afternoon, sir. It's an informative session, and you have conducted very well, and insightful information which you have shared. I thank you for that thing. Sir, I want to ask you something. Like these days, we teachers, we are dealing with such students who are too advanced, and they have got access to devices, technological devices. They have access to internet. So in such scenario, what and when we have in our schools limited access to the technology, so how can we maintain the inclusive learning of the students in such scenario when the student is coming from that background, they have all the devices and they have access to that thing. So in classroom, we do not have such technologies we are not using. So in such case, how can we deal with, how can maintain the inclusive learning? This is my question, sir.
Yes, I mean, this question is something related with all the apparatuses which we use while delivering lecture. That's true. I mean, it is not difficult to get equipped with those technologies. And if you have certain limitations, that can be gradually removed, either by you or by the institution you are part of. That's a different thing. But at the same time, I mean, student efficiency, you see, does not lie. I mean, how much he and she is aware with or up to date with modern technology. Because you should, as an individual, try to underline your significance to the classroom because of certain values you stand for. I mean, for example, suppose certain answers a student gives, and you give the same answer. The quality of your delivery should be far better than the student.
Okay, sir.
For example, I teach students in electronics and computer engineering also, and artificial intelligence. Basically, they are the students of technology, they know all the things. But I never had this feeling while standing with them that I'm basically thinking about those things which they know and I don't know. Those things never come into play, because a classroom is not the tools. It is about what you stand for. In a classroom, it is you who is important as an individual rather than the technology which you bring or somebody else brings to the classroom. So I think that you make your own personality as a teacher, you should make more dynamics. and more pertinent to the classroom, rather than the tools and techniques will naturally can be purchased by somebody when you have resources.
Okay, sir. Thank you very much, sir. Thanks a lot.
Assalamualaikum, sir.
Assalamualaikum, sir.
Yes.
This is Amreen Rahman from AMU City Girls High School, sir. Firstly, I want to pray my all gratitude for the fantastic your session, sir. And definitely it will help us too much to imply for your thoughts, sir. I just want to ask a little bit question. How has communication technology changed the way we learn for our students?
Actually, you see, as I say that, I have underlined the significance of the art of communication in the classroom situation. And I have said it also that when you communicate to an audience, the value of your communication does not depend what you say, that is the content. It largely depends how you say it. You see, I give an example, practical example, perhaps you people will understand it better. When you go for interview or somebody goes for interview for job, now what happens is that there is a set of panels, 4 and 5 people are sitting. All of them may not be very intelligent, but at least we expect that at least one of them must be an intelligent person. Now, when you face question, sometimes you see you are not able to answer simply because the question is framed properly.
Yes, sir.
And sometimes the question is very well framed, but at the same time you don't know the answer. Now, sometimes you see you give the answer, but you are not speaking the way that you can attract or fascinate their attention. Though you are saying so many things, so many significant things, I mean, your entire answer is full of, or response is full of contents. Sometimes you may not know the answer exactly. You may know it partially, for example. But your style of communication is so inspiring that you are able to have some impact on them. And you see what happens is that those people who think that they can learn everything through hard work, they tell everything because they have memorized everything.
Yes,
but
sir.
Very bright mind. They may become very innovative. They may express their ignorance in such a beautiful manner that it might evoke certain kind of response from the people. The same happens in the classroom situation also.
Okay, sir. Okay. Thank you so much, sir, for your concern and these words, sir. Thank you so much.
Assalamualaikum, sir.
Yes.
Sir, Dr. Farad Parveen from AMU ABK High School Girls. So thank you for sharing your expertise. No questions, but I would like to put few inputs. Sir, we have been attending this online in service training program, and we had sessions explaining how to create active learning environment in the class, like peer interaction should be there, group activity should be there, interactive techniques should be introduced by a teacher, each and everything we had studied. And today, after listening you, I have come to this point, a very important point, that is the art of the communication that is done by a teacher itself is the most important aspect in a class, because it encourages the logical application of the concepts in the real world. Because if a teacher asks a question to a student in a scientific manner, as you said again and again in your presentation, that scientific temperament should be developed. So curiosity is a very important thing that is to be developed in a student's mind by a teacher itself. So if lack of communication is there, active learning is also not there, or poor communication skills are there of a teacher, the teacher is not able to deliver his or her statement in a nice manner, student will not be able to understand. So I have got this summary that art of the communication not only lies on a student itself, it is an important part by the teacher itself, because teacher is the sole person who will create this active learning environment in the classroom. So thank you for sharing this expertise.
I mean, when you explain these things, naturally, sometimes you have to display these things in a live situation. Sometimes you have to inculcate in the mind the value of these things to the students. I mean, how communication is important. Generally, communication is taken in a very superficial sense. I mean, like how to speak and how to speak fluency with fluency. I mean, these are very different things there. I mean, these are natural things. Actually, communication means so many things which we generally do not talk about. And 90% of your importance in any human situation, in whatever capacity you work, whether you work in bureaucracy or you work in legislature or you work, for example, in a school or you work in administration, it depends on your communication.
Exactly, sir. Exactly.
Now, when I talk that one should ask his student to develop this talent to form questions. Now, this idea might be very abstract to them. So you should use certain analogy in order to make it more illustrative at the same time. Like, for example, if you say that, and the student you see these days, particularly class 9, 10, they play sports, they watch sports, you should ask them, look here, communication skill is just like playing games. And ask them not video games, but real games. Like, for example, framing a question, if you're familiar with football, forming a question you see is just like taking penalty in football. Now, the moment you will say like that, taking penalty in football, the entire picture will become very clear, because you see, a person who is raising question is just like a player who takes penalty in football, or who is the one who is delivering a ball to the batsman. If the ball is not properly delivered, you cannot expect the batsmen to play the ball, because the ball has to be legitimate. It should be well crafted according to the rules and the code of the cricket at the same time. Similarly, in football, it has to follow the rules of the game. That's why you see the responsibility, you see the onus basically falls on the person who forms question or raises question. So this talent, we should inculcate with them and try to engage them in a variety of situations where they should know how to, form questions.
Yes,
Good
sir.
morning,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
Dr. Naushad is there,
Hello,
and physical education teacher, and I understand what you want to say. Exactly. You are taking, for example, from the sports, and I know when suppose a bowler and he will want to deliver a good delivery. Definitely, their aims, their target should be clear and appropriate. Definitely, he will get good communication with the batsman and take a good answer. I very much right you are, sir, here.
Hello,
Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum. I'm Farhat Tabassum from ABK Girls High School. I'm teaching basically 9th and 10th classes. After hearing your enlightful lecture, I have come to know that for creating logical and critical thinking, not only the knowledge, but also a style and art of communication is very much necessary.
Exactly.
Only that will bring about logical, critical thinking among the students, that will bring about fruitful outcomes within the students.
I give a very simple example. Since all of you are mature, we are connected with this university and other universities nationwide, for example. Tell me frankly, and everybody, all of us have knowledge of our respective disciplines. There is no doubt about it. But how many people are there whom you want to listen? If you are free, very few people will want to listen. It does not mean that the others whom you do not want to listen, they don't have knowledge. They have knowledge of the respective, and they have expertise at the same time. But you see, anybody who is going to teach is not known for the content. He is supposed to known for certain things which goes, beyond the content. Take a very concrete example. Suppose you are a student in medical college, any medical college, and a professor of medicine is coming to deliver a lecture. Now, the professor is a consultant also. It means that he is, diagnosing and at the same time treating, writing prescriptions for the patient. That's one of his job. But at the same time, he must have a very good communication skill. The reason is that he is not simply a consultant. He is a professor also. He has to teach people. And in order to teach, in order to explain something with a very innovative use of language, he can create a very good atmosphere in the classroom. That happens with the teacher like maths, for example. Suppose somebody is teaching maths, the primary aim of the teacher should not be that to solve a problem. but also to communicate in a fascinating manner, because these days particularly math is the most vulnerable subject. They get answer everywhere, and similar happens with all the factual subjects, except those things which are conceptual. Even there, this AI has intervened. So in such a situation, your style of communication matters a lot. Again, I'm using this word style of communication in a very broad sense.
Yes, thank you so much, sir, for nice explanation.
Assalamu alaikum, sir. My name is Huma Mukhtar from AMU Girls School. First of all, thank you so much for this informative session. Thank you, sir. Sir, being the teacher of economics, I want to know what type of modern communication technologies, or even we can say apps, are best suited and reliable for class 9th and 10th level students for gaining or attaining any kind of information.
You see, the tools, naturally, there have been so many, the speakers who might have come here, they might have spoken. I'm not a very suitable person to mention all those tools, because I think that all of them exist. And if you please search on internet, you will find many of the tools which can be used. But again, as I say that efficiency in the classroom does not depend on what kind of PowerPoint presentation you give and what kind of algorithms you are using, what kind of apps you are using. These things, if you want to know, simply by...
what can be reliable, trustworthy?
What do you mean by reliability?
Content-wise.
Yes, you are raising a very critical question that depends on your critical thinking, in fact. Because you see, it is like this, for example.
Yes, sir.
When in post-graduation, students write dissertation these days. They write the dissertation, so once the topic is given, they go to internet and they get all types of information. When they bring, and if you look at the physical structure of the thesis, it looks very good, well calibrated. It has all the theory, all the references, everything, which in fact you are not expecting them.
Yes, sir.
Now, since I know, or we know the students personally, what the student is capable of, then what happens is that we have our own method of diagnosis and we track them immediately. Whether you have, sometimes even technologically they might be foolproof, that there is no plagiarism, but there is plagiarism.
Yes, thank you, sir.
It can be detected. So you see, you should, as a human being, as a teacher, you should try to see in what way I can make myself more indispensable to the classroom than acquiring all these paraphernalias, which can help you initially, but not in the long run.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
You see, if you have a person beside you and you have the image of the person, it's better to understand the person while being beside it instead of looking at the image.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
As a
sir, thank you, sir.
Minimize their dependency on technology. We should tell that how important it is, but at the same time, we should try to ask them to look at it critically. And if I conduct my critical analysis of any of the electronic device, naturally it will take time, but perhaps you will get a very insightful result.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Sir, I just want to add on this: technology can assist, but nothing can replace the power of live teaching, sir.
No, it cannot simply assist, it can paralyze also.
Paralyze also, yes, sir. True, sir.
It does, no doubt. It helps in many ways, but one should know that what role technology is playing in the classroom and what role the teacher is playing in the classroom.
But it cannot build a real connection and understanding and personal guidance. It cannot, sir. I feel.
Not exactly. I can give you many examples. We listen to the lectures of so many people these days online. I find very few.
Yes, sir.
Most of you find very few of them very fascinating. And there are certain people who speak in a very ordinary situation, but they are very enlightening and very insightful, very powerful. That depends on the quality of the mind.
Yes, right. Real connection.
Yes, sir. Quality. Yes, sir.
Yes.
Sir, excuse me. My name is
from AMU City Girls High School. सर जैसे अभी आपने कहा कि हाँ टेक्नोलॉजी जितनी बढ़ती जा रही है वो सर हम ह्यूमन बींग्स को पैरालाइज कर रही है. सर दिस इज ट्रू. आयशा मैम ने भी कहा कि हम लोग टेक्नोलॉजी का इस्तेमाल बेहतर से बेहतर कर सकते हैं, सर जैसे कि एक एग्जांपल हम लोग सेट कर सकते हैं, जो इन लोगों ने रोबोटिक टीचर्स जो निकाले हैं सर, वो रोबोटिक टीचर जो है वो बहुत अच्छी कम्युनिकेशन स्किल्स है उसके अंदर, बहुत अच्छे से एक्सप्लेन भी कर रहा है, लेकिन सर वो जो एक ह्यूमन बीइंग के अंदर इमोशंस आ सकते हैं अपने स्टूडेंट्स को लेकर के, मतलब स्टूडेंट क्या पूछ रहे हैं, हम जिन इमोशंस के साथ, जिस गेस्चर के साथ में हम लोग मैनुअली एक्सप्लेन कर सकते हैं सर, वो रोबोटिक टीचर जो है वो चीज, वो इमोशंस लेकर के नहीं आएगा सर, वो सिंपैथी या वो इमोशंस जो होंगे सर वो लेकर नहीं आएगा सर। जैसे अभी आपने कहा ना कि हमें पैरालाइज कर रही है जो टेक्नोलॉजी, सर दिस इज ट्रू कि हम लोग पैरालाइज्ड हो रहे हैं।
No, that's bound to. In fact, I mean, we are talking about this problem today when we are surrounded with technology. Those who were sensitive, I mean, 100 years back when so many of the modern technologies were not there, they had raised some very critical question about them. That does not mean that we should reject them or abandon them, that perhaps we will peril our own survival, but one has to be very, I mean, be very critical with them while using them. But at the same time, I underline that this technology has this magical power that it somehow minimizes your critical ability also. So our responsibility automatically gets covered.
It is the
थोड़ा सा
way
सर
with
हम ये
which
भी
we
ऑब्जर्व
are.
करते हैं सर, हम जितना ज्यादा टेक्नोलॉजी का इस्तेमाल करते हैं ना, अगर हम कोई चीज सर्च कर रहे हैं इसके ऊपर सर, वो चीज हमें मेमोराइज नहीं होती है, अगर हम थोड़ी देर के बाद में देखते हैं ना वो चीज हम रिकॉल करना चाहें तो सर वो चीज हमें
Yes.
रिकॉल नहीं होती है सर,
You
ये
see,
चीज भी एक
the same happens with the students also. Now, suppose if a person has no memory,
yes
the person's other faculties you see will badly damage. The person's imagination cannot work. The person you see, I mean, his critical thinking will not work. The person you see will become emotionless at the same time, because our emotions are created in coordination with all these faculties like our imagination, reasoning, our memory. So the memory you see is a very vital thing. It is just like the battery of your cell phone.
yes sir.
Yes,
Now-
sir, exactly. You are true in your saying that technology cannot be rejected completely, but it should be used in a proper manner. Like there are so many online platforms that are created by Government of India itself, like Diksha app for students is there, and there are so many other apps where teacher have uploaded their original contents. So those type of the online platforms can be introduced to the students so that they can go to the original content.
Ma'am, you are right, for example. But
Yes.
again, you see, most of us think that technology should have been developed, but it should not have been introduced to that extent in education sector. Like,
Yes, sir.
it's very important. In medicine, it is very important. In other areas, in civil, I mean, defense and civil development, it is very important. But it should not have been introduced in such a way in education. I mean, then perhaps it would have been far better. And because this, I mean, intensive use of technology, you see, so many things have already been damaged. Like, for example, when I teach particularly students in engineering, and they are engineering students, they themselves say, I mean, they admit it, that they are unable to maintain their memory. I mean, they deal with technology all the time. They have to do it because they are, after all, students of technology.
Exactly, sir.
Assalamualaikum, sir.
We should also keep in mind that, for a minute, please, that you see, if we do not maintain the health of our memory, then you see, our quantum of happiness will decrease gradually.
टेक्नोलॉजी के बारे में
Yes, sir.
बताएं।
Yes, sir. True.
मैंने कहा टेक्नोलॉजी की वजह से तो हो रही है क्लास।
We are different from animal not because we have intelligence. We are different from animal also because we have memory. And a memory, you see, which goes beyond our actual experiences. An animal remembers simply to that things which he or she experiences in life. But human beings, you see, even remember and can imagine those things of which they do not have any experience. And that's why you see, philosophically speaking, human beings are the only creature who know their death, that they will die. The other creatures simply have no idea of it. This, idea has entered that we will die in this world, has entered because of the language. And the more technology will enter in our life, the space which language has acquired in our mind will gradually shrink. This is what we call
Yes,
dehumanization.
sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
True, true, sir. True.
Very true, sir.
Excuse me, sir.
That's true, sir.
Good afternoon,
Walaikum sir.
sir. Good afternoon, sir. I'm Hina from ABK Girls. Sir, I do not have any question. You have said all so many things that there is no question left. But I want your opinion. Like we are dealing with the students who are accessing the fast-paced digital content, which is momentary. They are watching on YouTube Shorts or Instagram Reels. That is momentary. It is coming on their screen, and then with a swipe, it is moving out, and next content is coming. So, in such scenario, when the student is growing with this type of mindset that things are moving and changing at a fast speed, then how as a teacher, how can we strike the right balance between traditional classroom method, which is composed and time taking, and it is a time consuming process, with these students who is having the mindset of changing the digital, matlab, accessing the world, digital world with a fast pace. So I just want your opinion on this, sir. It is not my question. So
No, I
can you
understand.
please
I
guide
mean,
me?
the problem on which you have just shed light is something with which everybody you see is grappling these days. I
Yes,
mean,
sir.
but as I said that the student remains with you for a very limited, hours. Most of the
Yes.
time, he spent his and her time with the family. Actually, this problem is the problem with which families should be more concerned than the students. I think that if you are thinking in that way, perhaps you can think, but you cannot be very effective in minimizing it, because after all, once they go to their family, they do everything which they
Yes,
cannot do.
sir. Sir, actually, it's a matter of concern for both the side, for parents also, and for being a teacher, it's a matter of concern for us
Yes.
also, because we face many problems which we know that it is coming out due to this type of behavior, and it is not a fault of the student, but because they are living in such world, such era, it is their life. So sometimes
We
it
see
becomes
that,
difficult.
those students, you teach many students and you teach many of them. Those of us who are intelligent individuals, like for example, those students who are growing like intelligent individuals, they perhaps will manage it. The rest of them perhaps will perish with it. You cannot.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
You can morally and ethically might be very concerned, but perhaps
Absolutely.
it will not make much difference.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you, sir.
Assalamualaikum. Assalamualaikum, sir. My name is Mohammad Mansoor Khan, and I'm TGT in STS High School, teaching computer to the 9 to 10 students. I'm very much agree with like the communication technology with the help of the ICT devices. We can it may paralyze, or it may be a barrier to an effective communication in the classroom. But we do have to agree that without these devices, if we do not maintain the pace, we may be outdated also, because in the coming scenario we are going to have a totally ICT based classrooms, a smart classrooms, where we do have to be so much trained, or at least that much of trained, that may we deliver our subject, or whatever the subject it may be, effectively in our classroom. So it is also that I am it is not like I am not agree with the points, but I wanted to put my concern as well, being a computer teacher in the AMU schools. So,
No, you're right. The student should be asked that they are supposed to get equipped with these technologies. But what we have to do is that, they have to use it very carefully, and that is where the challenge lies. At the same time, it does not mean that they have to abandon it. That's not possible. But one more thing, that their educational progress will not get affected simply because they use less technology. That perhaps will not make much difference.
Sir, my question is this, Assalamu alaikum, sir. That nowadays the test is also online based. There are many competitive exams which are being placed on the computer screen. Then how the traditional method will equip the student to take the online tests?
Now that kind of blending is already there. I mean, the basic use of computer students already know. In fact, they know more than you used to know at your time. And they know these basic things, but whether the answer the student will give is correct or not will depend how much the student has read, whether the student has read online or he or she has studied with books. But I'm sure that anybody who will study with books will perhaps will have better memory than the person who realizing on screen.
So I think that if our training is also taking place offline, we will be able to learn better.
Yes, that is a better mode of communication, particularly when it comes to learning. But as I tell you that if the number of students is very limited and you have a very good environment and you teach offline, the output you see would be far better than if you teach online. I mean, the same communication. Suppose I'm connected with many of you here. Had I been delivering the lecture offline, I would have said so many other things at the same time and in a very different manner.
Yeah,
Because
the classroom management is
Yes,
better. Classroom management is far better then.
many things I cannot say simply because of the limitation of the medium.
Yeah.
Yes,
Thank you so much. We're already 8 minutes past our scheduled time.
Yes, that's my
Again, I'm so happy to see this interactive session. I'm very much thankful to the enthusiastic participants because they are the people who are making this session successful and lively. At the same time, I'm thankful to the resource person who engaged them well, and it was a relevant topic, very, very relevant. Yes, we are engaging through technology and we are at the same time being critical of technology. This is what is critical mind is all
Exactly,
about that
exactly.
Professor
Yes,
Beg
sir.
was talking about in the morning. I hope the message, the ideas, thought that Dr. Asif shared with you, you'll be engaging with those in your own leisure and reflect upon them in your professional life, and that will be more fruitful. Thank you so
Certainly,
much.
sir.
Yes, sir.
Thank you so much.
Thank you,
thank you
sir.
so much, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you,
So we
sir.
log off and
Assalamu
see you
alaikum, sir.
tomorrow. Meet you tomorrow
Thank you
morning.
so much, sir. Okay, thank you, sir. Assalamu alaikum,
Thank
sir.
you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much, sir.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you, sir.